Good to see you.
In October 2008, Bethesda released Fallout 3. That was a little over 13 years ago as of the making of this video. 13 years is a pretty long time by any measure, and we've come a long way in what a video game can do. A long way. But that doesn't mean classics like Super Mario Bros. Aren't enjoyable anymore, and those are over 30 years old. Bethesda is releasing Starfield this upcoming year, so I wanted to see if one of their older classics still held up to the test of time. So let's fire up the son of a bitch and revisit the old bastard. Now I know we all know the story of Fallout 3, but for those of you just discovering the internet, let's do a quick recap. The story begins with you born in Vault 101, one of many giant underground nuclear bunkers built before the Great War that took place almost 200 years ago. Tragically, your mother passes away after your birth, leaving you with only your dad, who thankfully sounds like Liam Neeson.
My goodness, just a year old and already walking like a pro.
You go through your awkward childhood and adolescent development phases while the game establishes that you will spend your entire life in this vault. However, on your 19th birthday, you find your dad has left the vault. He meant for you to stay within the safety of the vault's walls, but his departure upends the status quo and social order in Vault 101, and you're quickly forced out of your home to go after him. Your search for Dad will take you all across Washington, D.C. and the surrounding areas now known as the Capital Wasteland. When I first walked out of Vault 101, I was blown away at the landscape. I thought, where the fuck do I go now? Fallout 3 was probably the first large-scale open-world RPG I ever played. It was the first game to really let me go anywhere without holding my hand. As far as I knew, this was the only game at the time with a world this big. It was pretty daunting, and for the first time since playing Zelda, I actually felt pretty lost in a game, and I absolutely loved it. There really wasn't much on my Pip-Boy indicating what was around, so I had to actually look out into the horizon and pick out landmarks to travel to. Even though it has the smallest map compared to later games in the series, I still find it easy to wander around for a while. It's hard to do because I've played through the game dozens of times already, but I still get a little bit of that lost feeling every now and then, and it's great. I don't know exactly how other people feel about the characters in Fallout 3, but I feel like many of the characters in the game come colored with their own flavor, and I find it interesting to talk to most of the NPCs.
Let me see if I can't hammer this garbage into shape.
Eating, drinking, farting, and screwing! Ha ha!
Colin Moriarty, at your service. Welcome to Moriarty's.
You're just trying to confuse me with your fancy vault education and your textbooks.
A big complaint of Oblivion was that there was like 14 voice actors for the entire game. Fallout 3 had about 39 or 40 voice actors, not as many as Skyrim's 70, but enough to where I don't notice a lack of variation in voice acting. What was new and cool to me at the time was the customization of the character. Well, maybe not the face-making part, but definitely throwing points into different skills was a novel concept to me. My first playthrough, I most likely threw my points into things I didn't need, making the game harder than it had to be. I think the leveling system still holds up well to this day if you know where to throw your points to get the optimal build for your playstyle. Eventually I realized the only way for me to play was to throw all of my points into energy weapons and turn everything in my way into a pile of ash. I think my only complaint about the skills is the speech skill being useless since, unlike in Fallout New Vegas, speech checks are determined by chance, not skill level. This means that you can pass most if not all speech checks by save scumming until you're successful. In Fallout 3, weapons have a condition level that determines how much damage it can do and how long it's gonna last unless repairs are made. Shockingly, this didn't turn me off of the game. Before Fallout 3, the only other game I had known to do this weapon degradation nonsense was Dark Cloud, and that feature alone caused me to trade it away for another game. I remember thinking, I can't keep the weapon? What's the fucking point of that? Maybe it was because I was older, or maybe it was because I quickly realized you could find countless weapons lying around, some of which could be sacrificed to repair your existing guns. I don't know, it just gave me this rationing mentality, like I didn't want to waste my plasma rifle that only had 15 rounds on some punk-ass raider. No, you save that shit for the super mutants. The absolute best part of the game for me, however, is the soundtrack. Composed by the famous Inon Zur. The way the music seamlessly blends into the landscape you're exploring is awesome. You almost forget the landscape and soundtrack are separate from each other. It's minimalistic and sad, making it a perfect fit for both the game's theme and story. It really makes exploring the wasteland much more immersive, and in a way it kinda makes up for the aging graphics. Okay, now let's talk about the combat. I personally don't dislike the combat, but a lot of people do, and I can honestly see why. I don't know what it is about Fallout 3, but the combat feels stiff and kind of basic. Moving weapons around the screen doesn't feel as responsive as it should be, and it's sometimes hard to get a clean shot on an enemy in the heat of combat without getting pummeled yourself. I should also point out that there are many instances where tougher enemies amount to simple bullet sponges. I actually don't mind bullet sponge combat. In fact, I like how Fallout 3 pulled it off. Most human enemies take only a modest amount of rounds, whereas mutated monstrosities like rad scorpions require a bucket of bullets to kill. The game does make up for its lackluster shooting with VATS, which is sort of an auto-aim feature where you get to pop a few rounds into your enemies in slow motion. You can also blow off limbs, which is very satisfying and also makes up for the less than stellar combat. To be fair to Bethesda, they had to take a 2D isometric RPG and turn it into a first-person/third-person shooter RPG hybrid. Playing it today, well, I admit it looks rusty. Okay, it looks really rusty. I mean, it looks good from the right distance, you know? Too close and the textures get too blurry, too far and the game won't even render the object's full texture. It doesn't help that the game is set after a worldwide nuclear war, which means the game's palette consists of various shades of brown. Whatever color there is in the game is often extremely washed out and dull. I think the brown adds to the apocalyptic feel, but some people might find it boring or even hard on the eyes at times. The animations are pretty stiff too. The game uses the Gamebryo engine, the same one that's used in Oblivion, so both share similarities in their quirks. The limitations of the game's engine cause the characters and yourself to all look stiff and share the same animations. There's also a few small bugs here and there. Not often, but every now and then you'll see a bug or two. But I mean, come on, it's a 13-year-old game, what do you expect? It's gonna hurt your eyes a little. Fallout 3's karma system, though interesting as it was back in the day, is kind of broken in certain ways. In many cases, it makes sense that certain actions would reduce or raise karma levels. Depending on your karma status, you'll be hunted down by either Talon Company or the regulators. I have two problems with this. One, I understand being evil would make bounty hunters come after you, but bounty hunters coming after you for being too good? That kind of makes the whole system pointless if you have to fight mercenaries regardless. My second complaint with this system is stealing reduces your karma whether someone saw you or not, so you can get to the lowest karma levels by just taking everything that's not glued down without anyone even getting wise to your act. So how the hell does anyone know to send people after you? I know, it's an old game and I'm picking it apart too much. This is the first game I ever encountered where you could pick up everything. From coffee cups, to plates, to empty soda bottles, to tin cans, there was no shortage of junk to loot. Most of this stuff is only worth 1 to 5 caps at the most. It also has, like most everything else in the game, weight, which adds up quickly. This low weight to worth ratio makes all this junk you can pick up just that, junk. Its only real use is as ammunition for the rocket launcher, but finding the schematics for it and finding the components, in my opinion, just isn't worth the hassle, when there are better weapons that you can just loot off of dead bodies. I guess if you wanted to be a negative piece of shit, you could see this junk system as gimmicky, but I still appreciate the option to pick up tin cans off the floor. Some other complaints people have had deal with things like the story not living up to the original first two Fallouts, or why 200 years after a nuclear war people still haven't fixed the world. I didn't get too far into the first two games, so I don't feel upset about this, but I understand that the game didn't keep its original vibe. As for why no one made anything new in 200 years, I don't know, I guess that is kind of weird. Maybe everyone's too busy fighting raiders? They could have at least, cleaned up a little bit. I thought the fact that the game's main story is so short was more of a bummer. Overall, the game does show its age. It's not unplayable, but for those of you not inclined towards Fallout or Bethesda's RPGs in general, it may be harder for you to pick up. I definitely recommend you get the game and try it if it's ever on sale. For a while, the Steam version had issues with Windows Live and crashing on startup. This was eventually fixed and they removed the Windows Live requirement, but if you don't want to take any risks, you can get it on GOG.com. That version has always worked on Windows. Sorry, Steam. You'll most likely be getting the Game of the Year edition, in which case you'll get all 5 of the DLCs bundled into the game. These will take you to various new locations outside of the Capital Wasteland, such as Point Lookout State Park and the city of Pittsburgh. It also extends the level cap from 20 to 30 and extends the main story beyond the last quest of the base game. Is it a classic like Super Mario Bros.? Maybe. It depends on your tastes. Me, well, I grew up with this game, so I'll always say this one is worth the money. Fallout 3 is still a solid 8 out of 10 for me.